Hello, everyone. This episode of Cold Breaks, I'm at Road Atlanta for the HSR Fall Historics event on September 23rd, and my guest is Cesar Gaxiola, who works for Olthoff Racing, who is a fixture in the historic racing paddock. And Cesar is working on a 2006 NASCAR Cup car that was driven by Max Papis at the 2006 Watkins Glen NASCAR Cup race for Furniture Row Racing. So, Cesar, give us a little background how you got started.
Well, I kind of started my career as thinking I was going to work on street cars, actually. When I was in high school, I started working at a place that actually changed engines. All they did was change engines on cars. There's cars that came in with engines that were bad, and we just replaced them. And that got me interested in cars. And then my dad also had this thing in his head where he was going to buy these used cars at auction, fix them up, and become a millionaire somehow. So he had some people that are mechanics that come by the house and work on cars, and hung out with them. So that's kind of how I started, and I decided, okay, well, this is what I'm going to pursue. So I went to go to a technical school called Nashville Auto Diesel College, and I graduated from there, and I think it's Lincoln Tech now. They got bought out. And I decided it's going to be really cool to go work at a Chevy dealership. They came by the college to start recruiting, and I thought, oh, great, I'd go work on Corvettes and Camaros. Oh, this will be great.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll end up working at some really old Malibus and Caprices. Not very exciting. I wasn't making a lot of money. I was driving a long way. I lived in the north side of Atlanta, and the dealership was in the south side of Atlanta at the time, and it's a long drive, especially with traffic. Not making a lot of money, so I went back to work at the engine shop I was working at when I was in high school. Well, the two owners of that shop shut down, and one of them went and did his own thing. I don't know where. I never heard about him again. But the other one, actually, a Jamaican guy named Chris Hall, actually came to work at the racing school at Road Atlanta. And he invited me, why don't you come up here, just check it out. And I came up here and checked it out, but they weren't hiring. So I said, okay, no big deal. But it just so happened the shop right next to our engine shop was a dyno shop called Atlanta Dyno, I believe. And it was also a Smith Performance competition. It was like two business in one. And he asked me if I could help him. And I said, well, I got nothing else going on. So I helped them with doing a lot of Mustang work, Fox body stuff, porting cylinder heads, building engines, building mainly drag racing stuff. Well, he ended up shutting down shop and actually ended up working for Elan Motorsports, building engines, which is another division of Panoz. So when he left, I said, well, I'll go check out the racing school again. And that's when I came back to racing school, and I talked to the guys there. I was just coming to check it out, and I know Chris Hall. And I said, well, actually, we have a race this weekend. Would you be interested in coming and helping us out this race weekend? I said, sure, no problem. So, yeah, you can see what it's like, and can see what you're like, and see if you like it, see if we like you. So that's how I started. I came and helped them out for that race weekend, and they offered me a job. So that's how I started working at Panoz Racing School in 1999 maybe.
Wow.
And I was there for about 3 years, and it just seems like the work was never ending. You're always working. I started as just a regular mechanic, and by the end of the 3 years, I was in charge of all the racing school cars, which we had 25, I believe. And I also traveled with the race team. We had about 22 race cars as well, which they're all same bodies, it's just different engines. And I was also in charge of the gearbox department. I took care of all the gearbox rebuilds for pretty much all the racing schools, which was Texas Motor Speedway, Sebring, Road Atlanta, and Mosport as well in Canada. So after that, I asked them for a little bit more money because it's a lot of responsibility, a lot of work. I'd like to have a little bit more money. And they pretty much told me nobody in my position was worth the kind of money I was asking, which to me wasn't a lot of money. But anyway, I kind of left racing with a bad taste in my mouth, and I decided I was going to go do something else. But I still had my hard card from working at a racetrack, so I decided for the Petit Le Mans in 2002, I'd come by. I have a hard card. I just come by, watch some racing, see some friends, whatever. So I came and hung out for a little while, and I ran into a friend that was a driving instructor for the school. His name was Chris Hall, a British guy, a really good guy. and and I just ran to him and he talked to me briefly. Then later during the day, just before I left, he said, "Oh, I'm glad I caught you. I didn't even think of it. I got a car I need prepped. I got a Panoz race car that I need prepped, and I don't have time to prep it because I'm coaching a guy. I was wondering if you could come by tomorrow and take care of the car for me." I said, "Sure, no problem. I'll stop by tomorrow." So he figured, oh, it should be only a couple hours. I should need basic stuff. So I came by the next day, and the car was owned by a man named Larry Wang. Uh, Really good guy. Became a friend of mine as well. But anyway, the car that needed only a couple hours of work turned into a car that was falling apart. Actually, I ended up having to do a lot of work to it to get it up to par. In my opinion, anyway, needed wheel bearings, needed a lot of stuff. I don't remember exactly what it was. It was back 2002. But anyway, I spent the whole day at the track prepping the car, and the whole time I'm there, Chris Hall is telling me about this car they're getting. They're getting a 2003 Z06 to go run in Grand Am Cup at the time, and Larry Wang happened to be there too. And we knew each other, but we never really talked to each other because he raced his own deal, and the racing school was a rent-a-car kind of thing, and he had his own car. But anyway, he's telling me about the car, and we're talking about it the whole time. Well, anyway, by the end of the day, they asked me, we actually have a partnership with Motorsport Vehicle Development, I think, or Motorsport Vehicle Technology, which is a technical school down the road here. They have a motorsports program. He said, we have a partnership with them. We're going to have 3 other students to take care of the car, but we would really like to have somebody that's experienced. And I didn't consider myself experienced at the time. I still consider myself kind of a noob. They said we'd like somebody with some kind of experience to kind of oversee them and make sure they're doing a good job kind of thing. A crew chief, I guess, is what it says. And I was still kind of burned from the racing. I was not sure if I really want to get back into racing. I said, well, don't give us an answer now. We're going to get delivery of the car. I forget how much it was, a month from now or something, at Kershaw Raceway, which is in South Carolina. I said, we're going to take delivery. Just come by and hang out with us for the day while we get the car. Just hang out, see the car, talk to the kids, that are going to be helping us out, and see what you think. You can give us an answer there or later. It's up to you. I said, no problem. So, sure, I got nothing else going on, so I figured, what the heck. So I ended up going actually to the Kershaw and took delivery of the car. I thought it was pretty cool. It was a brand new Corvette. Who wouldn't think it'd be cool at the time? So it was kind of neat. And I forget the people that built the car. Anyway, we drove it, and it had some handling issues. The driver, Chris Hall, who was very experienced British driver, he said pretty much it felt like you were driving on ice almost.
Wow.
So it had some handling issues. So the guy said, well, we'll take it back. We'll work on the handling issues. But also, Grand Am Cup have created a second spec of the Corvette. You had a Corvette which had like the normal bodywork, and it had but you could have like a pretty hopped up engine. But then it had a second spec that they opened up that you could have carbon fiber bodywork, a lighter weight spec. But then you had to run almost a stock engine. I think you're only allowed like a dry sump oil system and some exhaust. And you were allowed to run coilovers, but they opted to stick with the leaf springs, which I thought was kind of an odd choice at the time. But anyway, we ended up getting delivery of the Corvette to Daytona for the Roar, and the car was even worse handling than it was before. Okay. It was terrible. It's kind of funny story. The guy says, it's like I'm driving on oil. That is terrible. And the guys offered to take the car back with them and work on it. I said, no, we'll take the car from here. Thank you. So he pretty much, with his experience, decided the car is just too stiff. We need to go softer on suspension. So he ordered all the monoleafs he could find with that car through GM. And we pretty much kept going softer and softer until the car was actually ended up handling pretty good.
Okay.
And that was actually my first pro racing experience, because before that it was just racing school, but now it's actually a proper professional competition. Mm-hmm. And the car was fast, but we had a lot of issues because of the build quality. And in my opinion, I wasn't experienced enough to catch a lot of it. Like I said, I still consider myself a noob, but the car was quick. And I remember one race at Daytona, which, like, again, we're running leaf springs, and we're running against cars, other Corvettes with coilovers and good suspension, bigger engines, but they're heavier. Mm-hmm. And Chris is just constantly passing them on the infield. He said at some points they would block them, so we just go on the grass and pass them. And we were doing really good with the car, but we kept having reliability issues.
Okay.
But anyway, we did a whole year with that car. Well, I think about 3/4 to the year, we were running, I think they had 3 Daytona prototypes that were running at the time. But there were some new manufacturers coming in. I think they had Fab Car and Duran were the 2 manufacturers that were running. on a full schedule, and they had a Multimatic which only ran the 24-hour Daytona, but they actually won that race, but they didn't run any other races that year. But anyway, there was, I think it was Riley Technologies, Crawford Composites, and another manufacturer was coming out with another car. I forget their name of the manufacturer. But anyway, there was several manufacturers coming in with new cars, and Larry decided, I want to step up and go buy a Daytona prototype. So we go from, which we didn't think at the time, oh, it's no big deal. The initial cost is going to be a lot more, but you know, the maintenance is not going to be that much more, and the work's not going to be that much more. And we all found out pretty quickly after getting the car we were completely wrong. And Larry ended up with after picking one car, ended up turning into a huge ordeal. Unfortunately, it turned into a big mess. But anyway, I ended up buying a Crawford in the long run, and ended up being a great car and great people to work with. And actually, the first race we did at Homestead, we talked to Max Crawford, and he says he could not get a car in time for Daytona 24. There was no time to finish one, but thinks he can make one for Homestead, but he'd have to let us know. And so actually Larry Wang actually chartered a plane to go up to North Carolina to visit Denver, North Carolina, to visit Crawford Composites. And on the way up there, he flew us, me and one of the other mechanics up there, just letting you guys know he's only building one more car this year, and already committed to buying it. We were supposed to be going up there to look at the car and make a decision, but I didn't want anybody else to jump ahead of me, so I just bought the car. So we were able to go see the car that I just bought, pretty much. So we over there meet Max. He's great people. I used to joke that to work at Max Crawford's shop, you had to be like a super nice person, because everybody there is just like super nice. So it was just surprising, because I've worked with a lot of rough people, I guess, throughout my years.
Yeah.
So it was a good experience. Max Crawford's a super nice guy. His family is just nice. And we get this Crawford race car, go to Homestead, and we're like, I don't know what happened during the race. I don't remember, but for some reason we got up in like the top three, like the beginning of the race. But then we had a horrible pit stop doing a driver change, because we never really practiced much, unfortunately, and killed us. We didn't finish that great in the end. But anyway, this just got us all excited with this car, and then we started getting into the maintenance and realized how much maintenance is in these cars. It's just, I mean, just the amount of work you do these things is just incredible. And we had no idea. I mean, we went from a little Corvette that you just change oil and tires, put some gas on it, and maybe an engine every now and then, because our stock engine wasn't too reliable, unfortunately. But went to this car, and all of a sudden it's got a proper race clutch and parts that wear out left and right. It's amazing the amount of work difference that I don't think a lot of people realize goes from just a stock car to a prototype. And now it makes sense, but back then it was like, it's just a car with four wheels. What's the big deal, kind of thing.
Yeah.
But that was when I got into the top class of racing, because Grand Am Cup, which kind of like a support series, but now this was Rolex. They told a prototype class, which is the top class in one of the main series in America, which there was only two main series at the time. It was Rolex and IMSA as far as road racing went. Those were the two top series. So now we're running Grand Am Cup with a Daytona prototype. And I mean, we weren't very impressive. We were a small team, small budget, but we had a lot of fun. And we had one good result in Mid-Ohio when we almost finished on the podium, so we're pretty excited about that. But I think Larry told us, like, close to the end of the year, he says he had a budget of about $1 million to run the whole season.
Okay.
He said we didn't even run Daytona, which is about a quarter of your budget normally. We missed that, and he says about 3/4 of the way through the season, he already blown over that budget.
Wow.
So, yeah, he decided he didn't want to do that anymore, and that's when I started getting into flying work, pretty much. People would hire me to fly and help them out, and it just kept going on from there. I just moved all over the place from there.
Wow. So you mentioned you worked in Champcar. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, well, actually, when I was doing flying work, I was working for a team named SX Racing, and they ran a Crawford Daytona prototype. And I did quite a few events with them. I don't remember how many, but I did the whole year with them, I think. Just not all the races, but quite a few of the races. And the last race of the year was Mexico City. And the name of the guy that was in charge was Mike Guay. He had told us he was actually selling the car. He wasn't racing anymore. And he was getting bought by the guy that was actually renting it for that race weekend, or he might have bought it at the time. I think it was Rob Finley? I think it was Rob Finley. And he had rented the car to run to Mexico City, so we were pretty much running a car for him at the last race of the year, Mexico City. And the car was valuable because the way Grand Am worked at the time, only the top 10 teams in points were guaranteed their own pit stall. There were so many cars in the series that everybody else had to double up or sometimes even triple up on a pit stop, on pit stall. So you might have to share your pit stop with somebody else. So now all of a sudden you got to organize, okay, when are you guys coming in? Okay, we'll try to come in before or after you.
Mm-hmm.
And so now he was actually fighting 10th in points with another car, which I forget the other car he was going up against. So Rob Finley was driving and Michael Valiente was his pro driver. So they said, okay, if we finished, pretty much had to finish in front of the other guys. If we finish in front of them, we're guaranteed 10th spot. That means you guys are guaranteed your own pit stall for all of next year. So now, okay, so we got to finish in front no matter what. So Ron Finley decided, okay, so I'm just going to do the first lap of the race, and I'm going to jump out and put my pro driver, Michael Valiante, in, which is what we did. He went out there, came immediately in, put Michael in, and he drove the whole 2 hours and 40 minutes or whatever it was by himself.
Wow. I guess that was before minimum drive time.
Yeah, there was no minimum drive time. So, yeah, he pretty much drove the whole race, but except for 5 minutes by himself out there. And we finished in front of the other guys. We're not very happy with us for doing that. But we got the guaranteed 10 spots, so they had already bought the car. So now they're guaranteed. They take the car away with a guaranteed pit stall. They got their own pit stall. They don't have to share with anybody for all the next year. So. But the whole time we were in Mexico City, it was the same weekend as Champcar was there. And the way the pits are set up, you got a little pit stall, and there's like a chain link fence, and there's another pit stall, or I should say pit stall. It should be at least the garages. Okay. So the garage is like chain link fence in between all the garages. Well, the garage next to us is actually Panoz Racing, who was their defending champion, Sebastien Bourdais.
Okay.
And one of the gentlemen on the team, SX Racing, his name was Don Cesar. I don't know his last name. We just all call him Don Cesar. Mm-hmm. And he was actually trained or raced with Pedro Campuzano, who was the crew chief for Bourdais' car. And so he actually introduced me to Pedro, and we kind of talked back and forth throughout the weekend. So, and he seemed like a good guy, and we were cracking jokes all weekend. Well, anyway, near the end of the weekend, I asked Pedro, hey, you guys wouldn't be interested in hiring any new mechanics? So, well, it's funny you should say that, because actually we have the two cars now, which was at the time was, I think it was Sebastien Bourdais, and I can't remember if it was Bruno Junqueira that year or if they had a replacement, because Bruno got hurt really bad in one event. I forget which one it was. And they might have had the other driver there at the time, which was a Spanish driver. I forget his name now. Sorry, but anyway. Anyway, they said, we're trying to get a third car together for the 2002 champion, who was Cristiano Damara. He went to Formula One with Toyota. Well, he lost his ride. So they're trying to get a third car together. So we're trying to get a third team, and if it comes together, we're going to need some mechanics. Mm-hmm. So actually, just give me your contact info. We'll share contact info, and I'll let you know. Mm-hmm. I said, well, that's pretty cool. So, and the whole time I'm thinking, all those mechanics over there, there's a bunch of engineers over there. All these guys have really high degrees. They wouldn't want anybody like me. I didn't know nothing about. I just thought everybody in Champcar was like an engineer. I didn't think much of myself at the time. Still, I always didn't really think much of myself. I guess I was always really humble. Maybe that's a nice way of putting it. But anyway, I would call Pedro about once a month and ask, hey, what's going on? Oh yeah, well, we're working on a deal. We're trying to see what's going on. And after about 2 or 3 months, kind of just stopped calling us. Well, obviously this is not going to work out. It's been 3 months. It's not going to happen. Well, one day I took a job with it wasn't a job, but I had a friend from Venezuela that was working for a team in North Carolina, a World Challenge team, Tyndall Racing. He said they needed some help, and if I was interested in coming to help him, yeah, sure, I'll come help you guys. So I went out there, and I think I spent a week, maybe 2 weeks with him, and I got a call from Pedro. And Pedro, hey, Cesar, how's it going? It's going all right. I was wondering if you were still interested in coming to work for us. I said, well, actually, yeah. He said, well, I just lost one of my main mechanics. I don't have time to train anybody else. I need somebody with experience. So I was wondering if you were interested in coming to see us, and we can talk to you. You can see the facilities, the cars, and we'll just discuss it and see what you think. I said, okay, sounds great. So they actually flew me up there, and I met him, met with him and the team manager. Goodness, I forget everybody's names. I'm sorry, guys. But I met with a lot of people up there, and they had me play with some pit stops, which was the first time I actually had to do a pit stop with only one wheel nut. Well, no, the Rolex car had one wheel nut, but I never did pit stops, I think. It was mainly the other guys doing pit stops. And anyway, I had practice with a proper wheel gun, I guess I could say. It's metal or wheel nuts, which, I don't know, they have like 20 teeth on them. It's kind of a cool, similar to what NASCAR has nowadays, I guess.
Mm-hmm.
But anyway, I got to play around with that, and I thought it was kind of cool. And they asked, at the end, they asked me, would you be interested in coming to work here? I was like, yeah, actually, I'd be interested. And they said, well, how much is it going to take to get you up here? And I threw them a number, and they threw back a number that was about 10 grand more than what I asked for. So I'm thinking, that was stupid. I had no idea how much they paid. Obviously, they paid a lot more than what I asked for.
Yeah.
So I think I might have been the lowest paid guy there. I don't know. It didn't matter. I was excited to move somewhere. Top team at the time, defending champion.
Wow.
I was a rear mechanic on Bourdais' car. And I thought it was weird. They thought I was an experienced guy because I didn't think I was that good at it, but obviously other people thought I was pretty good. And I think that's how I kept making it in racing. People just respected what I did and thought I did a really good job. And I thought also, I'm just some Joe Schmo out there. And I don't think I'm that great a mechanic. I think I'm just hardworking and I pay attention to detail. And that pays off in racing.
Yep.
And one of the things that the crew chief mentioned years later is one of the things he liked about me is my attitude. And he felt like I could get along with anybody. He says it's so important, and especially for this team, Newman Haas, they spend so much time together, so many tests, so many late nights. He says you really need somebody that can work together because you spend so much time with each other, sometimes more than your family.
Yeah.
That's one that was a huge positive for me when I met you and your attitude and how you were. And I'm sure that the experience with the car didn't hurt either, even though I had no experience in open wheel whatsoever. But that seemed to work out pretty good because we kept winning races and kept winning championships. And I had a good time in Champcar. I did 2 years, 2006 and 2007, which I guess was the Sebastien Bourdais' 2 last years in racing. It's funny. I remember the first time I had to do pit stop, and we did tons of practices and during testing, during practice, not so much in qualifying, but we always practicing pit stops. But I remember my first pit stop. I'll never forget. Sebastien Bourdais gets the provisional pole. He gets the regular pole. He leads the whole race pretty much until the first pit stop. Comes for the first pit stop, and I'm like, oh man, it's like even more pressure. I'm thinking, if he was running dead last, if I screw up the pit stop's no big deal. But now he's like been leading everything up to this point, and I'm the new guy on the team. I'm thinking, man, if I screw this up, I'm so done. So I remember being so nervous. But he comes in, the pit stop happens, the car leaves, and as soon as the car leaves, I keep thinking, did I tighten the wheel nut? I don't remember tightening the wheel nut. So I'm like panicking, and I don't want to tell anybody because what if I'm wrong and I did tighten and he comes in, we checking his tight, and he just lost the lead. So I don't know what to do. So I'm like sweating bullets. I don't know, should I tell him? Should I not tell him? Should I say something? So pretty much I'm like panicking until like the next pit stop, and finally comes in for the next pit stop, and this time I do like a double tap on the wheel gun, make sure it's tight, and that kind of like became like my signature there. I always like double tap the wheel nut, make sure it was tight. I did it from then on. And after that pit stop, I told the crew chief about it. It might have been at the end of the race. And he just started laughing. And you realize if you want to tighten that wheel, it probably would have fell off as soon as he left the pits. So, I had no idea. But that was a pretty funny story. But we ended up going on to win. I think we ended up winning 6 or 7 races that year. So he won his 3rd championship. And then the next year we got a new car, which everybody kept saying, the only reason Sebastien was winning so many races because you guys have that car for 11 years and it's so well developed and you got a huge advantage. So everybody was looking forward to the next year when we had the new Panoz car coming out, Panoz DP07, and everybody said, now it's level playing field, so everybody's going to see who's really the fast driver. Well, Sebastien ended up winning 8 races, I think, that year. 1 more race than he did before.
Wow.
So he ended up winning more races than he had before. So I thought it was just hilarious. Well, yeah, it did show who the really good driver was. I was really impressed. It's the first time in my life that I had a driver that, the way that crew chief put it, if you keep the car running, he's going to finish on the podium. He's that good, and he really was an impressive guy. And not only that, on TV, if you ever watch some of the interviews with him, he just seemed like an a-hole. but working with him, he's like the nicest guy in the world. He was an amazing guy to work with. He's always thinking his guys. He's always thinking them. He's always taking them out to dinner. He was just like the super nice guy. It's like a great experience, even though you're working till like ridiculous hours of the night sometimes. But everybody was willing to put in the work because they knew this guy was going to do good, and they wanted to bust their butts for him.
Mm-hmm.
And even so, I mean, it's just who I was. I don't care. I mean, some of the racing I did, even though we weren't winning races, weren't doing great or qualifying great or whatever, it just kind of became a thing. Like, I always wanted to make sure to do a good job because I didn't want to be the guy to point the finger at. And unfortunately, my career has happened where I've made mistakes. But I tell people people say, "Oh, don't worry, won't tell anybody." I was like, "Look, I don't care if you tell somebody. That's kind of my attitude. I don't care if you tell somebody about my mistakes because that might prevent somebody else from making that mistake."
Exactly.
And that's kind of my mentality. I've made mistakes before, and I tell them, "Look, I'll tell you what mistakes I made right now because hopefully it'll stop you from doing that."
Yep.
And I'll probably learn from your mistakes. And that's just kind of my philosophy with racing. And I think it's funny because I always thought I had some kind of weird thing with me. I think I have ADD, and I got diagnosed recently with it. But it's funny because when working on Champcars, I was always so worried about not doing a good enough job. So I like double and triple check everything, and thankfully nothing ever happened where we never had a mechanical failure because of a mechanic that I know of. At least during the race, we had some failures during practice, and sometimes maybe even qualify, but I don't quite remember. But as far as racing goes, most of our incidents with other drivers are just crashes. So we're very fortunate. I think part of that is because of the driver, part of it is because of the engineers, and the other part is because we just had a really good group of guys that work together well.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Wow. What teams did you work for in IMSA?
In IMSA, I worked for Core Autosport.
Okay.
And again, when I left, I did IndyCar for a while, and after IndyCar, I didn't want to do IndyCar because the way it ended is kind of, the way it happened is IndyCar kept shortening their schedule. I did it 2011, 12, and 13. And they kept making their schedule shorter and shorter because they wanted continuity, people to have something to watch every weekend or every other weekend so they wouldn't lose interest.
Okay.
So we had I think it was like a 12 or 14 race schedule in about, I don't know, it was like 10 months maybe it was. But they kept shortening to the point where it was about 6 or 7 months. And unfortunately, it works for NASCAR because they have on-the-shop crew building cars, and then they have their on-the-road crew.
Yeah.
Well, in IndyCar, the same crew that's putting the cars together, the shop, is the same crew that flies to the event, the same crew that's doing the pit stops.
Yeah.
So it's kept getting, every year kept getting shorter and shorter, and it kept getting worse. And not only that, but these teams are like, now they have to hire these guys in the off-season, where it used to be like 2-3 months, they have to pay them to keep them around. Now they got to pay them like 5 months. But there's not that much to do in 5 months, and they're still coming to pay them. So a lot of teams were just letting people go, and they have to go find another side job until the next race, pretty much next race season started up.
Okay.
And unfortunately, I was working with Dale Coyne, actually, which is a funny story. The reason I ended up at Dale Coyne is because Sebastien Bourdais came to drive for him. Because he says after he lost his Formula One ride, he came to drive. Dale Coyne is the only person that would call him on a regular basis, so he was one of the first person that called him about if he was interested in coming to drive for him. He said, and he had a responsibility with another race team in Europe, but he was able to do all the road courses and street courses. And actually, one of my junior engineer from Newman Haas actually was the first one to call me. His name was Scott Raymond. And he called me, and it's like, oh, just interested. And I was actually working at a dealership at the time because I lost interest in racing because of being burned out and other stuff that happened. And I didn't want to move anymore because it seems like no job ever lasted more than 2 or 3 years, and then you're moving because they lost their sponsor or the owner lost interest and wanted to do something else. And Scott Raymond called me first and told me, no, it's going to be great. We're going to have Sebastien driver. We're trying to get as many as the old Newman Haas guys in here. And so just talk to Sebastien. So I got in touch with Sebastien, and Sebastien says, yeah, I'm coming to do this thing, but I want to do it right because Dale Coyne was bad, I guess. He had a reputation that would try to hire as few people as he could. And I understand he's a privateer team. He's paying out of his own pocket, so he's trying to keep costs down. It's the reason why he's been in racing for so long because he always has a small budget. But Sebastien says, I don't want to do this unless I have all these positions on this sheet of paper, and you have to fill all these positions, and you can't have the same guy doing multiple positions. So he had like a shot guy, engineer, DAG guy, which is data acquisition guy, front end mechanic, rear mechanic, gearbox guy. So he had all these positions. He said he gave them. And I want people in all these positions. Otherwise, I'm just going to be wasting my time, he said. He said, but he said, I give credit to Dale. He says he's pointing up the money to hire all these people. But another thing, he's got a lot of new guys there. He said, I don't want to go out there and drive my butt off and then come in the pits and lose time because they messed up my pit stop. So I want to have some quality guys in the pits, and that's why I'm calling you.
Wow.
He said, that's what we thought of you. And he said, okay. Well, he said, He said, just talk to Dale. He said, we would really love to have you. Just talk to Dale. So that's what I did. I talked to Dale Coyne, and he was really interested in hiring me. And I wasn't making a lot of money at the dealership again, so he offered me a lot of money. And I was like, okay, let's go try this out. I'm not a fan of IndyCar, but what the heck?
Yeah.
At least, if nothing else, I get hung out with my friends again and make some money. And the first year in IndyCar was a lot of fun. and the guy that ended up appointing as crew chief for the car. Because it's funny, a lot of guys had left the team. The bad thing about where Dale Coyne is in Chicago, and almost every other IndyCar team is in Indy.
Yeah.
So it's almost like the guys that end up at Dale Coyne are the guys that can't find a job somewhere else. So it's like as soon as they get there, they're already looking for a job in Indianapolis because they don't want to move and they don't want to travel. I forget how many hours it was to get to Chicago, maybe 2-3 hours to get to Chicago. So as soon as they hired me, pretty much they had 2 more guys leave, and so I ended up having to prep the other team. Instead of Sebastian's car, I was working the other car to begin with, just prepping it. And the guys that are assigned to be in charge, there was only 2 guys left, I guess. The team, everybody jokes around and says Dale Coyne was looking around. He only recognized 2 people, and those were the 2 that he appointed as crew chiefs. One of them was what's his name? I forget his name. He was name was the same actor as the guy in Chips. I forget his name. He was the Hispanic guy in Chips.
Okay.
But anyway, he was one of the guys, and then the other guy was named Arturo Morimoto. Super great guy, and Arturo was like really experienced Mexican guy. I mean, the guy was just awesome. I mean, he could do it all. He could do carbon fiber. He could do gearbox. He could do anything you needed. The guy had been there forever, and he's really good at what he does. So he became the crew chief on Sebastian's car.
Okay.
And he was just a funny guy. He's hardworking and expected you to work hard. And if you busted your butt off, he'd get along with you great. If you didn't bust your butt off and just slacked, he just wasn't a big fan of you, so he just wouldn't talk to you. And I mean, that's just the way it should be. I mean, we're all a team. We should bark our butts off, and we had a good time. We didn't have great results. I mean, we did okay. We weren't a top running car, but we always didn't have the biggest budget either as well. So we did okay. And unfortunately, Sebastian ended up getting a ride with another team the next year. And we ended up getting Justin Wilson, which is another guy that I was a fan of. So we ran Justin Wilson for the next 2 years.
Wow.
But at the end of the 2 years, like I said, because of this shortening of the schedule, and had a talk with Dale, and pretty much he asked me if I had talked to any other teams. And it's funny because I had people calling me all the time, but I always turn them down. And I guess I wasn't clear with Dale. I said, yeah, I had people calling me all the time, but I've committed to you as long as you're committed to me. Well, he pretty much sent me an email, said he no longer needed me anymore. I guess I should have been better at communicating. As long as you're faithful to me, I'll be faithful to you. But anyway, he ended up letting me go, and kind of left it as, we'll talk next year, kind of. And I'm like, once you let me go, that's it. I'm not coming back and doing this every year.
Yeah.
But anyway, my roommate at the time had gone to work for Core at the Porsche program, the GT Le Mans program. And he told me, just give him a call. Talk to Morgan Brady was the guy in charge. Talk to Morgan Brady. So I talked to Morgan Brady. I think I sent him a resume. And I was on vacation, I guess. Well, after I left Del Coyne, I was taking like a month off. And he called me while I was in Georgia with my family. And he said, hey, I just got your resume here. I was wondering if you wanted to do an interview, schedule one, or just talk over the phone. I said, well, if you want me. And I'm like, just 3 hours away, I could drive up to your shop and we can meet in person. I said, actually, that'd be great. So that's what I did. I met Morgan. And I met with him and talked about the program, and asked me what kind of program would you be interested in, the Porsche or the prototype program. To tell you the truth, it doesn't matter to me. It's wherever you think I'd be a best fit. I'll work on anything pretty much. It doesn't matter to me. And I didn't care too much about Porsches. They're great cars, but I wasn't really too excited. And the prototype, I guess, was a little bit more appealing to me because I just thought it just looked cooler, I guess, as the V. I just gotta be honest, it just looked cooler to have a prototype.
Yeah.
But he says, I think I'd rather have you on the prototype. And so that sounds good to me. Just let me know, And I forget how many weeks went by, but finally he gave me an offer, and I accepted. And I went to work for Core for 4 years. I was in lead mechanic. It was the official title, which is kind of like, I guess, the car chief for the car on the prototype program. And we did good. I think they had won 3 or 4 championships at the time, and I came in, and it's kind of cool. So we started. They had just had the merger between, which was the Rolex series, and IMSA had a merger, and that was the first year of the merger. It's kind of like a steep learning curve for me because I'm used to being like the rear mechanic, which is like the highest mechanic position besides lead, I guess what they call car chief, which is the guy that kind of oversees the whole thing. And now I'm kind of in the car chief position, which is the first time I've been in there, and I'm thrown with a new car, new series, and I just kind of throw it into the fire at the Roar B2024, which is a month before the official 24 hours. And I mean, it's a little bit stressful because it's kind of new to me, but I did good in their eyes. I mean, I'm never gonna say I did good. I always say I do okay. There's a lot of good people out there. I'm just very fortunate to end up in the right places, and I think partly I believe that. I honestly believe that God put me in those positions. I give the credit to Him. And but anyway, I did good with them, and we ended up winning the 24 hours at Daytona with that car, our first time out.
Wow.
Not only with the prototype challenge car, but also with the GT Le Mans Porsche.
Wow.
So that was pretty cool.
Yeah.
I stayed up I didn't want to fall asleep in between pit stops because I was terrified I was going to be too groggy to pit stops by the end of the race. So I stayed up the whole race. And by the end of the race, I was just dead tired. But I was doing the pit stops. We were getting it done. And I remember the guys complaining about the car. It was overheating. It was down on power. We were having all kinds of just driver-related issues. We just kept saying, we just got to finish the race. You got to keep driving. There's nothing we can do now. Just keep an eye on it. Keep an eye on it. We finished the race, and we won it somehow. It's just with the engine issues we were having, we were all surprised that we were able to finish and we won the thing. We were all kind of out of it. You get a little bit of a burst of energy when you win the race, but then it quickly dies down when you realize now you got to load the trucks before you go home.
Yeah.
And I remember it's funny because everybody's loading. I forget what time of day it was. It must have been like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon. And we hear over the intercoms because all the NASCAR trucks are waiting to come in the track. Is that everybody has to be cleared out of the paddock by 4 o'clock, and like simultaneously, like all the mechanics in the garage just start laughing their butts off because everybody knows there's no way we're gonna get out of there by 4.
Yeah.
When we finally get out of the track, and everybody they want to go out to celebrate. Hey guys, we're gonna go out and celebrate. Let's go out to Buffalo Wild Wings or something. They want to go get something. I was like, guys, I'm gonna go to sleep. I'm gonna go get a sandwich somewhere and go to sleep. So that's pretty much what we did. We went across the street from the hotel, got a sub or something, and went to bed. And I slept for like 12 hours straight.
Wow.
And I ended up doing the math from the time I woke up to the time I got back to bed. It was 36 hours straight, and that's pretty much almost every mechanic that does a 24-hour probably does something similar.
Yeah.
And this is insane schedule.
Yep.
And I learned my lesson. The next year, I pretty much as soon as I was done my pit stop, I set up my tires, my hoses for my pit gun, and I just try to take a nap. And that's what every pit stop I was taking naps, and that made a huge difference. It's so much you feel so much better by the end of the race.
I bet.
It's night the difference. But it ended up second year we ended up getting crashed out 15 minutes from the end.
Oh.
Burned the car to the ground, but still finished second somehow. So that's the first time I ever got crashed out of a race and finished second, which is kind of funny. And then a year after that, we ended up blowing an engine 6 hours in, leading the race with our slowest drivers. Hadn't even to put the 2 fast guys in, which is kind of disappointing, but we did good. But anyway, we won the 24 hours with 2 cars, which was pretty cool.
Wow.
Probably kind of rare. But then we go into the Sebring 12-hour race, and we ended up winning that with a prototype and with a Porsche as well.
Wow.
So that was like, they told us it was like the first time in history that the same team has won in 2 classes in 2 different races the same year. So apparently it's a pretty big deal. And to me, we're so deep into work, I guess it didn't really click to us. I thought, that's pretty cool, but we're just working our butts off anyway, just trying to keep up. And we had fun, but I felt like with Core, almost like every year it got a little bit less fun. And the last year was like just miserable, unfortunately, and we ended up parting ways. And I started looking for work, and that's how I ended up here. Actually, I had a friend in Florida who suggested, his name's Decal, he's been in racing forever, and he said, why don't you just send me a resume? I'll go post it in the bathrooms at Daytona for the historics. I was like, what?
I've seen that.
I said, people do that? It's like, yeah, people, I see it all the time.
Yep.
It's like, I was like, okay, and I'm kind of hesitantly sent him a resume, not thinking much of it. I was like, hey, who's in the world's going to call somebody's number to find in the bathroom? It just sounds like a joke, Yeah. But he did. He posted in the bathroom at Daytona, and the only person that called me was actually Dennis Olthoff.
Wow.
He wanted to meet with me. And around the same time, actually, Penske Racing, who I'd applied to, had actually called me up as well. So I actually interviewed with both of them, but I had gotten married in 2015. And I had a wife and a daughter to worry about right now. So Penske, I knew from previous experience, friends that worked there, and just knowing them as a team, how competitive they are, I knew I was almost never going to be home. Mm-hmm. And Dennis actually, the pay is gonna be similar. So I figure, it pays similar. At least I'll be home more, And in Dennis's position, it wasn't officially stated, but I was kind of going to be like the guy in charge of race cars because of my experience, because the other guys were always building these super performance cars, because we build a ton of those now. We're building more super performance cars that we know what to do with. Okay. But anyway, that's how I ended up with Dennis, because I decided, I think I don't blame Penske. You know, is like they're a big team, big name team. Everybody wants to work there, so they don't have to pay you big money because they know they've got probably 100 people lined up that want to get that job.
Mm-hmm.
And I was interested, but they also offered me the position. They offered me was the gearbox mechanic. I was going to be in charge of the gearbox department.
Is this for IndyCar?
For actually their new Acura program.
Oh, okay.
We're going racing in IMSA with an Acura.
Yes.
And they wanted me for their Acura. They wanted me in charge of the gearbox department, and I was kind of interested, but at the same time, I wasn't really. I can do gearboxes, but it wasn't my passion, I guess. Rear mechanic was kind of the thing I was comfortable with and used to doing. Car chief was only did that with Core. Before that, I was just kind of like the main mechanic guy. And the one thing that bothered me, says, "Oh, it's going to be you, it's going to be the experienced guy, and you're going to have a new guy to train with you as the other gearbox mechanic." I was like, I wasn't too keen, and I guess in having another new guy, and the way it usually works in racing, you're the guy in charge, you're also the fall guy whenever the other guy does something wrong, because you're responsible for overseeing everything he does. And I was like, it works for Penske. It's worked for many years, and obviously they're very successful at it. But I didn't want that kind of pressure. I guess I was married now, and I guess I didn't want too much pressure, and I wanted to spend more time at home. Between all those things, just added up. It just Olthoff Racing just made a lot more sense. And that's how I ended up here. And I've been here 5 years now. Just working on my 5.5 years now, and I like it. It's the difference between vintage racing and pro racing. Vintage racing is a lot more relaxed. Yes. I remember my first race I ever went to. I was working on a Lola Mark IIIB, a 1970 Lola Mark IIIB, and we get to the race, and there's an issue with the clutch. I mean, it was some weird clutch that I never used before, and the guy that put it in apparently assembled it wrong.
Okay.
So when they tested the thing on the lift, it would go through all the gears fine, but as soon as you put it on the ground and put any load on it, which he tried to drive the thing down to the pre-grid, and he made this horrible grinding noise. I was like, what in the world is that? So we narrowed it down to the clutch. We take the clutch off and realize it wasn't assembled correctly. So I remember the driver, Jim Cullen was his name. He said, "What's wrong?" I was like, "Jim, I'm sorry, but I'm going to have to pull the gearbox out and check the clutch. Something's not right with the clutch." Mm-hmm. And Jim just pretty much looked at me, and I'm used to saying to people behind me, I said, "We need to get it done. We need to make the next session." That kind of attitude, which is the way racing is. You know, we have to make the next session no matter what. Whatever is broke, we just got to get fixed. We got to get the track time. And he pretty much looks at me and said, "Well, I learned a long time ago not to worry about these things. I'm going to go have a beer." Wow. And I was like, I just looked at it, I was like, what? And it was just kind of surreal to me. I was like, okay. So I just gonna pull the gearbox out, fix the clutch, put the gearbox back in, had it done that night. Next morning, went out and raced, had some fun. And that was like my introduction to vintage racing. That just unbelievable to me. So you usually only have about, unless it's a test day, you normally have about 2, maybe 3 sessions a day, like 20-minute sessions. And then you prep the car, and if it's a decent car, you don't have a lot of work to do. I try to do at least all the prep work at the shop, so we don't have much to do at the track, which is the way it should be, but it doesn't always work out the way. And it's just a lot more relaxed, and the people that drive the cars and own the cars is really good people, really nice guys, and we get along with them great, and it's just a great atmosphere. And like I said, between just the great people you hang out with and how relaxed it is, it just works. So that's why I kind of stayed here. And nobody really. I had a couple calls from pro racing just to kind of fill in for pit stops, but then those stopped after a while because I always interfere with one vintage event that I was going to. But I'm pretty happy here. I'm not making as big as money as I was making in IndyCar, but I don't have to. I mean, my family's more important to me, and I'm spending more time at home, and that's what I'm happy with and happy about. And that's how I'm here. All my experience, just led me to here somehow, and it's just worked out.
That's a great destination. Do you have a favorite racetrack?
Favorite? I think probably if I had favorite as far as the states go, I think Laguna Seca has always been my favorite track. I think everybody says the only reason to go there is the corkscrew, but I guess I grew up with Gran Turismo when I was younger, and to me that was just the coolest racetrack.
Yep.
But there's a lot of other cool. I like a lot of tracks, but to me that was always, I guess, holds a special place with me. I guess because that's the one track that I saw in the video games I used to play a lot when I was younger, and that was the coolest track to me. So I guess Laguna Seca, but there's a lot of cool tracks in America. Watkins Glen, Road America, Road Atlanta. Yeah. I have also like Road Atlanta just because I spent so many years here. It's just a cool track. I'm a big fan of natural road courses, but also I like everything. I guess I could say there's some tracks I don't like. I'm not a big fan of Rovals. Daytona, it's okay because of the history, but I'm not a big fan. I'm not a big fan of Sebring because just flat track, and I guess it's just long, and it just destroys the cars that go there because
That's true. Yeah.
it's just a rough track. I mean, it's okay. It's cool because of the history, I guess I would say. I like them because of the history, but I don't like so much racing on them. But I'm not a fan of Robles, not a fan of Sebring. It's a lot of, some street courses I'm not a fan of. But some I am. Like, I love Long Beach. It's just a cool track. We used to race in Denver, Colorado. That was cool. We did 1 year at Baltimore, Maryland. That was neat.
Yeah.
Street courses are kind of neat and a different experience because you're right in the middle of downtown.
Yeah.
It's kind of neat. You just walk to your hotel. It's kind of a different experience. It's pretty cool. But this is a lot of cool tracks, like I said. But if I had to point one out, I guess it would be Laguna Seca.
Okay, cool. You've worked on a lot of cars. Do you have a favorite?
I guess as far as favorites, I guess my first championship with Champcar, I guess I wouldn't say a favorite, but I guess it's like the one I guess proudest of. I guess it was an old Lola chassis. I believe it was must have been like 10 or 11 years old at that time. It was getting phased out, and then the Panoz the next year. I like Champcar. To me, people have no idea what it's like to be in the pits with those cars, but those cars are I think were 800 horsepower. I think it was 850 with the push to pass. My numbers could be a little bit off, but I remember when that car came in the pits, the driver, it's like 7 seconds pit stops because fueling was really quick. A full load of fuel was about 7 seconds, so you're doing pits, the tire changes in about 4.5 seconds if you're good, sometimes quicker. And the car comes in, goes up on the air jacks, I start fueling, and the driver's already on wide open throttle. He's on the limiter, like pop, 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 pop. And the feeling of that, I mean, not only you're feeling the vibrations of the engine and the wastegates going off, you're feeling the heat and all that. And to me, that's just an unreal experience. You do your tire change, you stand up and you wait for him to drop the car off the air jacks because that's the signal for him to take off. As soon as they pull the fuel probe out, they drop the car, and he immediately wide open throttle. I mean, full sideways one way, full sideways the other way, and then finally the pit limiter catches him and he straightens out. But it's just an unreal experience. It's just the power. You could just feel the power from those cars, and just IndyCar just wasn't the same.
Okay.
I mean, they weren't as powerful in engines, obviously. But to me, just I think that's what made them kind of my favorite cars. And the cars were just so fast. Obviously, they made more power, but just the sound and just your body vibrating just for him being on a rev limiter in the pits. Goodness, back then it was like the coolest thing in the world. So I'd say probably if I had to pick the favorites, it'd be the Champcar cars. Not only that, but they're just the fastest in America at the time, except for Formula Ones. Those cars were insane.
Wow.
And I think Sebastien Bourdais, put it the best one time. He said he lived in, what's the name of the track down in Florida, West Florida by Tampa, where they have a race down there.
St. Pete?
St. Petersburg.
Yeah.
He lives in St. Petersburg. So he said when IndyCar took over the St. Petersburg race, he said he actually went to the race. He goes, oh, it was right next to me. Might as well go to the race.
Yeah.
He said is watching the race in one of the corners, and the cars go by. Well, that guy's going kind of slow. What happened to him? Then the next guy goes by. Well, he's going kind of slow too. And the next guy goes by. Like, wait a minute, they're all going slow. So he's used to the speed of a Champ car going through there, and he just couldn't believe how much slower these things were. They've gotten faster over the years, but just nothing beat the raw power of these engines that they had in these Champ cars. And even the Panoz, because the Panoz, when it came out, I hated the car when it first came out because it was a lot of work to get it to the point. Usually when a team gets a brand new car, the pro teams, they completely strip that thing down to nothing and then do a lot of testing on the tub to find out the limits of twisting, I guess, and bending, all their engineering numbers to figure out. It's all beyond me. It's stuff they do, get all their numbers to figure out what they need to do with suspension and shocks and all that stuff. But anyway, we stripped that thing down and we built it the way we decide it needs to be built. Like everything's built our way. Even though it's a spec car, there's a lot of little fine-tuning things you got to do. The way you route lines, the way you route electrical. It's just a lot of little things that their teams just kind of does their own way. So it was a lot of work. There's a lot of stuff that wasn't really, I guess, it's a lot of hard carbon stuff that we had to sand to make flat. And there's a lot of little fine detail stuff that kind of aggravated us. And we spent a lot of time in the car, so we kind of hated it when we first got it.
Yeah.
But then when you get to the first event, which I think was a test at Sebring, and then we also tested Sebring, we started having shifting issues because of a pneumatic shifting system. And the car before that was a shifting rod that you had to shift.
Like
it was sequential, but
it was
sequential, but you still had a shifting rod. But now you had paddle shifts with pneumatics, and had issues with pneumatics on those things, and they finally figured that out. But anyway, when we go to the first test at Laguna Seca, which a track that I loved, and he goes out there. He ends up setting the track record with that thing, and that's when you realize, wow, this thing's not like every other Champcar that built before.
Wow.
And he did he got it actually on the last lap of the last session of the last test day that we had there. So pretty much the last lap that he ever did that track, he set the record that was previously held by a Formula One car. I forget who it was, but I'd give it to him. The Formula One car wasn't really set up for that track. They just kind of showed up and did like an exhibition lap and set a lap time. So they weren't really set. If they would have been set up for that track, there's no way we could have caught them. But anyway, Sebastien all of a sudden gets the lap time, and they had put up a bounty earlier in the day when they realized they were getting close to that lap time. They put up a bounty of I forget how much it was, $5 or $10,000 if you could beat the track record. And Sebastien beat it on the last lap. He did use the push to pass, but he also mentioned push to pass was only good for about 7/10 of a second, and he ended up beating the lap time by more than that. So he said, I could have beat it even without the push to pass, he said. So he was proud of that.
Wow.
But it was cool, and he ended up taking the whole team out to one of the local Mexican restaurants with the money that he got. But that was cool. That's when you realize, wow, this car might be actually something. And then we ended up going to different tracks and set track records, and that car ended up being a beast of a car as far as speed goes. That thing was impressive. And Panoz, being an American manufacturer just built down the road here, I didn't think much about them at the time because they didn't really build a lot of – they built some IndyCar stuff, but nothing really that stood out, I guess, in my eyes at least. And all of a sudden this car just goes out there and starts setting track records. They were, all the cars in the field were identical. They're all spec cars, but we're still setting track records. So that shows you, okay, it's not just like any other car out there. So it was pretty cool. It was a neat experience. And unfortunately, it was the only year for the Panoz. Because after that, the IndyCar merger happened. It was very disappointing.
What power unit was in that Panoz?
It was a Cosworth V8. I forget the exact liters of that thing, but it's a Cosworth V8 turbocharged.
Okay.
And I forget how many liters. Was it 3.6, 3.8 maybe? Like I say, I'm sure I'm way off on my numbers because it's been many years. People can look it up if they like, but it's an amazingly fast car. And like I said, that's the coolest experience to me. If everybody could be in the pits and just feel that, it's like amazing. I put it kind of similar to going and seeing a Top Fuel race and just feeling the noise and the vibration of the car going by. That was kind of like every pit stop in Champcar. It was insane.
That's cool. Did you ever get to do any job or work for any teams overseas for any races or anything?
We did. Champcar did travel overseas, so we did to do races. I think I traveled to Europe with them. We did Belgium and Holland with Champcar. We did Mexico City, obviously Canada. We did Australia every year, the Surfers Paradise, which is a really cool event. It's a street course. It's a really neat place. And one of the biggest crowds you'll ever see in your life, because always shared the weekend with V8 Supercar, and my goodness, the crowds that show up for that event is insane. It always surprised me that all the events that we had the biggest crowds were not in the States. It was Mexico City, it was Europe, it was Australia. Well, I guess we had so many things to distract us over here, so many things to draw our attention.
Yeah.
But it's just cool going overseas and just like everybody's like loving this. It's just amazing. But yeah, I got to travel. I think with IndyCar we went to Japan, but I got to travel quite a bit. Brazil. There's a lot of places I never would have been if I had gotten into racing. So that was one of the neat things about racing. All these places that I visited, I never would have gotten to visit if it wasn't for racing. Because if I would have stuck with working on cars, I'd have just been stuck in a dealership somewhere and never done any of this. I consider myself very fortunate, and thank God they gave me this opportunity. Because, like I said, I tell people all the time, I don't tell people I'm a good mechanic. I think I'm okay. There's a lot of really good mechanics out there, a lot of really good guys that just never had the opportunity because whatever stuff happened in life or location or just money, whatever it was, they just don't make it in, it's maybe just bad luck, I guess you could say. Never make it on these top teams, but there's a lot of really good guys out there that's just not in the right place at the right time. And I don't think I'm better than them just because I won a championship or a race. I think it just happened to be, I guess, just fortunate that people like what I did, and I happened to be at the right place at the time to end up with those teams. Because I think there's a lot of guys that are really talented out there that don't make it as high as I did for whatever the reason may be. But, I'm not going to tell anybody I'm better than them just because I won a race or just because I won a championship. But I do have more experience than a lot of guys out there, but a lot of guys have more experience than me.
Exactly.
I would put myself somewhere in the middle. And I always learn something new every day. I think I was telling you about this is the first time I ever worked on a stock car, actually, at a race. And I've been learning on it. I didn't realize that when you jack the car up in the air, the springs kind of fall out of it. and they weren't sitting right on the purchase at one point. So now you got to like hold the things in place, which that's not right. That shouldn't be that way in my opinion. So that stuff we're gonna have to sort out when we get back to the shop. And then another thing, I removed the radio button off the steering wheel because the car didn't have a radio harness. So, well, there's no point in having a radio button. Well, then the car wouldn't start because it wasn't a radio button. It was a kill switch button. So that was kind of embarrassing and disappointing, but I was able to bypass that and get it running. But I mean, I learn something new every day, and I'm not going to tell everybody I know everything because nobody knows everything. They can say they know everything, but there's no way. There's so much information you can learn out there.
Yep.
If you got the mentality that you know everything, you're never going to learn anything. You're just going to stay where you are and never going to improve. At least that's the way I look at it.
Yep. You could make yourself very valuable for any team that if you are willing to learn.
People ask me a lot, it's like, how do you get into it? How can I get into it? You know, and there's so many different ways. You know, I started working on street cars and just by, I joke with people, I tell them, how did you get into racing? I tell people bad luck all the time. But just new people that actually came to racing school. That's how I started. But other people started just showing up at races, asking people just, hey, you mind if I hang out? You know, and they just hung out and started meeting people, or some people just started cleaning cars or something. You know, there's so many different ways to get into this. Not one way to get into racing. And the biggest thing I tell people, this kind of sport, really with any kind of job, I think, in my opinion, you got to work your butt off. And people notice that. Not all the time, not all the people, but people notice when you work your butt off, and they want people with them to work their butt off. And that's kind of how it was my whole life. I always worked my butt off, and people liked that. And I had a good attitude. Not everybody that I worked with had a good attitude, and they still managed to get there. So I couldn't say it's a requirement, but I think just working hard, I think is probably one of the best ways to get in. It just get out there, meet some people in racing. You know, ask them if they need any help. You know, actually, I tell the story when Larry Wang bought the Daytona prototype. The three guys that worked from the Motorsport Vehicle Technology program down the road needed help one weekend with a Corvette, and I asked the guys, hey guys, I need some help this weekend to finish the car. Is any of you willing to come in and help me? And one of the guys said, well, how much are you going to pay me? You know, and the other guy was like, well, I got stuff going on, I'd rather go do that. And the last guy, his name is Jake Randalls, actually. He says, well, I'll come help you, there's no problem. So Jake came and helped me for the day to finish putting the car together. And the next year, when it came time to hire a full-time guy, and they asked me, who would you rather have, or who do you think we should hire? I says, well, obviously, Jake was the only guy in my mind. As you know, he was willing to work for free, pretty much.
Exactly.
That's the kind of guy you hire. And they ended up hiring him, and we moved to Daytona. Actually, became roommates in Daytona when we ran the Daytona prototype. And that's actually, I saw him here this weekend. He's running a car here this weekend. He has, I think he's has his own race team now. I don't keep up with him too much, unfortunately. I don't keep up with a lot of people, unfortunately, because it seems like I always get something else going on. But that's what I tell people, just working your butt off. And you might work for free a little bit here and there. I won't tell everybody don't make yourself work for free forever, but you might work a race weekend here for free just to meet people, if nothing else, and to get to know you. And work your butt off, and show them that you can do this. You may not have a lot of experience, and when you make mistakes, I tell people, if you make mistakes, you're going to make them. I make them. Everybody makes them. Don't try to hide it. Don't try to lie, which I meet a lot of people that try to do that and blame it. I'll tell people the story when I started in IndyCar, and they put me on the other car. It wasn't Sebastian's car because the two mechanics had quit. And I went over there, and one of the first things I noticed, all the AN lines, the oil lines and the air jack lines, all the lines have a big wad of silicone on them. I was like, what? And I'll go talk to the other chief mechanic, Arturo. It's like, why do they have silicone all over these? So he just shakes. He said, well, they had a line that was loose one time. They said it vibrated loose, so now they silicone everything. It's like, I've never had a line come loose in my life. So, well, I never have either. But, and I think that's one of the things that I've noticed in racing that a lot. When something goes wrong, they blame it on vibration. I'm not going to lie, I've had some instances where I could have sworn something must have flown up and hit a line and loosened it, but some of these cars with full bodywork, there's nothing I can get there to loosen it.
Yeah.
People are unwilling to admit that they didn't tighten something properly.
Yes.
And like I said, the whole time I was in IndyCar, I never put silicone on any of the lines. I never had one come loose. And so people are unwilling to admit their mistakes, and just admit your mistakes, learn from it, don't do it again. Just, okay, I shouldn't do that again. And at least with me, I respect the person more for admitting they made a mistake and learning from it and move on than somebody that's going to lie. No, I must have vibrated loose. Oh, I must have hit something. Oh, I must have done this, must have done that. And drivers do it too, I've noticed. Oh, they come in, something's broken on the car because they correct. Oh, I must have broken, that's why I wrecked. It works with that. Just admit you made a mistake, learn from it, move on, keep working hard. and you'll get far in life. And people recognize people that do good work, and they want to hire those people. And like I said, I don't expect you guys to work for free forever, but you might work at 1 or 2 race weekends for free just to make contacts. But don't do it. Don't do it forever. I've known some people that do it just because they love it, and I tell them, "You're crazy." We had this guy named Chuck, forget Chuck Homan, I think was his name. He owned an electrician. He was an electrician by trade, and he owned his own company in Houston, Texas, maybe. I forget where he is at, where he owned his own company. He flew to every IndyCar race with Dale Coyne on his own dime. He paid for his hotel, his rental car, his airplane ticket, just to be there in the middle of it. And he worked harder than a lot of the guys that we hired.
Wow.
And I just couldn't believe it. And he was an old guy. He was like 55, 60. I was like, Chucky, we used to call him Chucky, why are you doing this? Oh, I just like doing this. I just always loved this. Like, man, you're crazy. Why are you doing this? Why don't you just go buy a ticket and go watch from the stands and drink beer and laugh at us or something?
You could almost afford to drive a car at that point.
Yeah, but it's funny. He was a short, stocky guy, so he wasn't going to be driving anything.
Okay.
It's funny. I remember one time Chucky asked me, it's like, hey, Cesar, because we used to warm up the cars. We put up on jack stands. We started up. Then we go through all the gears, make sure everything works. All the gears are there, especially after changing gear ratios. And Chuck me asked me, Cesar, one thing I always wanted to sit in the car when we're warming up and go through all the gears. I always wanted to do that. He said, Chucky, I'm going to take care of you. So I talked to the car chief. I was like, Chucky wants to be in the car for warm-up. He's always wanted to do it. Well, let's put him in. So we put him in the car. And he's so short, you could literally put a flat piece of jab rack, which was the skids under the car, on top of the car, and his head would still have clearance. It was hilarious, but he was just loving it. It was like the coolest thing in the world.
That's cool.
And it's funny. And actually, soon after that, he ended up, when Sebastien left, for some reason, Dale Coyne decided to get rid of the guys that were working for free, which to me, why would you get rid of the guy that's working for free and working hard? Well, anyway, so when Sebastien left team, he called Chucky up. I was like, I'll get you a place here, Chucky. I want you with me. He became good friends with Sebastien, and Sebastien brought him along, and he went to
cool.
KV Racing. So I thought that was just a cool story. So Chucky got to go hang out with Sebastien somewhere else. He said, they may not be paying me, but at least I'm somewhere I'm wanted, he said.
Exactly.
And after that, I remember he said they were always calling him, asking him if he'd be interested in coming back. So, well, I kind of like to stick with Sebastien. And I think eventually he might end up coming back. I'm not sure because I left IndyCar since then, but it's just hilarious. But like I said, just work your butt off, and people recognize that. Try to do the best work you can. Don't be ashamed to double check or triple check your work, because some people feel like somehow that's an insult if you and not only that, but also don't be ashamed if somebody double checks your work, because I worked some of those mechanics where they get mad if I double check their work. I already checked that. I was like, man, we're just watching each other's backs.
Yeah,
I've made mistakes that people caught, and thank you for catching that. I've caught other people's mistakes, and it's supposed to be a team. You're gonna make mistakes. Try to help each other out. Watch over each other's work, because, even if you miss that, the next guy might catch it. And just because you think one way is the right way, somebody may have a better way. Just be willing to listen and learn every day. And you'd only keep getting better and better. Everything you learn from somebody else, like a lot of stuff that I do now is stuff that I learned from other people. It's just, oh, that's a better way of doing it. I'm going to start doing it that way. And it's just, even my pit stops, actually, the guy that I copied in pit stops, actually, a guy named, what's his first, Caffeine was his last name, Tim Caffeine. I copied his pit stop style, and when I was in Champcar, that's who I copied. And actually, I became pretty quick at it. I don't think I ever told him, but I actually copied him. Timmy Caffeine, he's a really good guy. I really like working with him. It's funny, I ran into him at an event, a vintage event one time, and he said, hey, it's Timmy Caffeine. I don't know if you remember. Yeah, I remember. I know exactly who you are. He's a really, really funny guy. But you're going to meet a lot of great people in racing.
Yep.
A lot of really experienced people. Try to learn from them, because you're always going to learn something new. Like I said, a lot of the stuff that I do now that I've learned from other people.
Yep.
I do come up with some stuff myself, but I'm not going to give myself as much credit as I've learned from other people. There's a lot of really experienced people. I've learned from them. Learn from the things they do well. Learn from the things they do wrong.
Exactly.
Because it's all going to make you better in the end.
Back on the checking your work thing, my longtime boss that I worked for, something that he pointed out, after I might have forgotten to tighten something here or there, was put a hand on every part that you just took apart. Put a hand on it. You'll remember if you tighten it up. Or for me, since then, something I figured out is when you're putting your tools away, did you tighten down the thing that you got the tool out for?
There's a lot of tricks out there. like I said, my crew chief Pedro Camposano in Champcar, he said one of the things, because the car will go up for 2 to 4 laps, come in, talk about it, make a change. 2 to 4 laps, come in, make a change. And every time I come in, the crew chief says, grab a rag, grab some cleaning wax, windshield wash, Windex, whatever. Start cleaning the car. Just start cleaning the car. Just go around the car, start cleaning it. And he said the reason he did that because you find a lot of stuff on the car that's loose or falling off or broken. And sure enough, every time you clean, you almost always find something. And that was one of these things that stuck with me. Just start cleaning the car, see what you find, and we always found something. And like I said, there's a lot of things that people do that help you remember. Oh, did I do this? Did I not do this? And like I said, you're not going to catch everything all the time, but that's why, like I say, you have to, in these pro teams, that's why we have multiple people, because you can watch each other's backs. Like I said, we made mistakes, and thankfully the pro teams that are mad, we were able to watch each other's backs. And I know when I was at Core, we never had a single mechanical failure out on track. When I was in Champcar, never had a mechanical failure. IndyCar, it was always either engine failure or something beyond our control, but we always try to get everything in our control. You can only control what you're doing. So, and that's a mentality you got to have. Everything that you can control, do the best you can, and everything you can't control, don't worry about it. It's just going to stress you out for no reason. You do the best job you can, and success will happen eventually. It'll come. It's just do the best you can. You can't control if the engineer has a bad setup in the car. You can't control if the driver flies off the racetrack, but at least as far as your job's concerned, do the best job you can. And it's funny, I joke, one of my famous sayings, I tell people, I don't like giving the drivers excuses, and I tell that to the drivers. I don't like giving you excuses, so I do the best job I can. So when they come in, oh well, if you hadn't done this, I tell them I don't give you any excuses. So I want you to come back. So, well, I did the best I could, but that's all I had in me, kind of thing, And it's funny because I've been using that for many years. So no excuses, because I don't like giving them excuses. So I do the best thing I can, so they don't have the excuse. Oh, if Cesar hadn't done this, I could have done this, kind of thing. But just like I say, I could keep reiterating over and over again. Working hard, and you'll be successful. Don't worry about everything else you can't control. There's stuff. Engines are gonna blow up that we don't build engines nowadays. Everything comes from somebody else. Engines are gonna blow up. Parts are gonna break that you don't build. It's just stuff's gonna happen. Don't worry about that stuff. It's beyond your control. The stuff that you can control, do the best you can, and success will come.
Very wise words. Cool. Well, I really appreciate you coming on and telling us your story.
Thank you for having me.